Welcome to TheKillFile, your favorite true crime podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Spears. Each week, we will explore the dark corners of true crime, unsolved mysteries, and murder. Join me as we uncover secrets, investigate evidence, and dive into the chilling details of some of the most fascinating cases. Get ready for a journey into the dark unknown because, in TheKillFile, nothing stays buried forever. Hello there, and welcome to episode 86 of TheKillFile. I am so glad that you guys are back for another story. Before we jump into today's case, a few quick reminders. First off, please take a moment to rate, review, subscribe, or follow on your podcast app to get the newest episodes every Monday, and it's a great way to support the podcast. Next, the new bonus content is out over on Patreon, and hopefully it will be back up on Spotify in a few days. As I am writing this, I spent hours online with their technical team trying to figure out why no one could subscribe, as it kept rejecting everyone's cards. It was something to do with Spotify, so hopefully that will be resolved. For now, if you want to get access to the hidden files, you can head over to Patreon, download the app, it's easy, and start listening right now. We have some great episodes out, including all about the life of Al Capone, the Great Molasses Flood, and also some plane crashes and their outcomes. The Hidden Files are a great listen if you're interested in a little history with your true crime or dark matters. Finally, don't forget to check out the website at TheKillFile.com where you can learn a little more about me, your host, if you're interested. And you can find the Listener Files forum to tell us your own true crime story for a chance to be read on an episode of The Hidden Files. And you can also find the merch shop. I will try to start posting some examples of the merch for you guys to see, but if you're bored or you're looking for a fun shirt to show off your dark humor, I would say check out the shop. It's a fun place. Okay, that's it for business. Let's talk about today's case. Today's case is going to possibly be a little more well-known, but it really freaks me out, and I want to go through it and learn all about it, learn exactly what happened, and talk about it. Fair warning, it's going to be quite distressing on a freaky level and on the murder level. Today, we are going to be talking about a man named Daniel Laplante. Trigger warnings for today are going to be rape, murder, murder of a minor, and stalking. Let's get to it. Today's story is going to take us on a little journey first to a place called Pepperell, Massachusetts in the year of 1986. According to a first-hand account of part of the case in a source that I used heavily for this episode, but I can't give it to you until later as the name will give things away. And according to an AI overview, Pepperell, Massachusetts was a rural suburban town that was small and quiet, but had a historic charm about it. In the timing of this case, the mid-'80s, Pepperell was starting to become what was called a bedroom community for the Boston area. After looking it up, Pepperell is about an hour from Boston and was considered a safer community as the people were close or tight-knit. At the time, the Bowen family was a part of this community consisting of father Frank Bowen, daughter 14-year-old Tina, and youngest daughter 8-year-old Karen. Sadly, about a year before things started to change for the Bowen family, they had devastatingly lost the girls' mother and Frank's wife to cancer. Their lives without their mother was undoubtedly different. Tina would say that she found herself having to take on more responsibilities and taking care of the home and her sister, while their father Frank had to immediately start picking up extra shifts and double shifts just to make ends meet. At this time, Frank worked as a restaurant manager at a hotel that was said to be not close to where he and the girls lived. This left the girls spending a lot of time on their own at their house with Tina in charge. Tina would say that her mother was her entire world, and the loss had absolutely devastated her as she was trying to pick up the pieces for the family. Tina had a friend named Kathy. They were best friends. In fact, Kathy's family at some point was moving away, but Kathy at the time was 15 and wanted to stay behind and finish up school where she was. This is when Frank offered to be Kathy's guardian and allowed her to move in with the family and stay, so she did. Tina said she was so excited to get to have Kathy move in where they could be like sisters. Can you imagine at 14 having your best friend in the world come and live with you? I remember how fun sleepovers were, and the absolute best one in the world was when you got to have a sleepover on a school night for whatever reason, which was probably seldom, but it was like they got to see your real life, not your weekend life. How fun for some young girls to get to do that. I'm guessing Frank offered because he had to work so much and because the girls had lost their mother. Maybe Tina being able to have her best friend around all the time could help with her grief. The family lived on a split-level home sitting on a gravel road. It seemed that the young girls had a blast doing what young girls do, talking on the phone, being boy crazy, and watching TV. They were young teenagers, and none of them had cell phones or any technology like that. There was a time that Tina recalled that her washer or dryer had stopped working at the time, so Frank had taken the girls to a nearby laundromat and dropped them off to take care of the laundry. If any of you have ever been to the laundromat, they are seriously one of the most boring places on earth. On TV, they always seem like fun and interesting, but in real life, they're not. So as the girls were bored, Tina and Kathy had started making up dances, and I believe that they had like music or whatever, and they were dancing in the windows at the laundromat. I guess a few younger boys had come in and gotten their phone numbers because they saw them dancing in said windows. Tina would say that at the time, because she was young and liked boys' attention, she didn't think that it was weird to give out your phone number to strangers who were young boys because the boys liked them. Keep in mind, this was a different time. You couldn't go home and give the number a quick goog to find their address or anything. It was just a home phone number. One day, not long after Tina was still processing the loss of their mother, the girls were still sad and grieving and wanting answers. They missed their mother terribly, and of course, Tina would say that she had an idea that now she thought was stupid, but at the time it seemed like a good one. She wanted to have a seance. They wanted to see if they could reach and talk to their mother from the other side. You know, if there was another side. Completely understandable that these young girls missed their mother and jumped at the chance to maybe get any hint that their mother was maybe not really gone forever, she was just in a different form. While the three girls had seemingly lit some candles and circled around, they were having their quote-unquote seance, and sources would say that this included a Ouija board. They would ask their mother if she was there when Tina would say all of a sudden the cover of their electrical box went flying off, scaring the girls, and after that happened, they were done with the seance. So for the electrical box to be in the room, I'm assuming that they mean like the circuit breaker or whatever, and I would imagine that that would probably be in like a laundry or utility room, right? If I remember correctly, the way Tina described their house, the laundry room was in the basement of the split level, so I'm guessing that's where they were. After the night of the seance, some strange things started to happen in the Bowen home. One of the first things to happen was that everything that was being stored inside of the shed in their backyard was out on the lawn one morning when they all woke up. There were tools, shovels, rakes, even their own lawn chairs flung around the yard and out of the shed. Kathy and Tina were a little freaked out because they knew that this couldn't be the work of their little 8-year-old sister Karen, so when they went and told Frank about the shed, he assumed that it was just one of the neighborhood kids or even a friend of theirs playing a prank, and told the girls to just go put everything back in the shed, and he kind of brushed it off. Karen would admit that she was young at this time, so she didn't quite understand what was going on, but she did know that things were a little off and weird as weird things started happening in their home. Tina would recount another thing right after the shed incident where the doorbell rang in the middle of the day, and when she went to answer the door, no one was there. A little weird, but again, not that big of a deal. A few days after the doorbell, one evening while the girls were home alone, there was a huge storm with loud thunder and flashing lightning. Tina said after a huge flash of light had lit up the house and the various rooms, all of a sudden she heard both Karen and Kathy screaming. They both told Tina that they had seen someone's shadow in the dining room during the last big flash of lightning, and at the time, they believed it was their mother who was with them. It was after this that the girls would start hearing random and scary knocks on their walls and windows around the house. One evening, Tina would say that the older girls had been on the phone with some boys when they heard a loud knock on the bedroom window. They thought that it could have been someone throwing a rock at the window, and it scared all three of the girls because Tina, Kathy, and Karen all knew it wasn't them. It couldn't be. They were all right there together. No one was seen as the person who could have banged or thrown something at the window. One night, in the middle of the night, not sure if this was the same night or another night, but around 2 a.m., the girls heard banging on the outside of their bedroom windows, and because it scared them so badly, they called the police. The police made their way to the home, but they too couldn't find anything or anyone that would lead them to the knocking. The girls were asked where their father was. When they had told their father about the incident, their father told them that they weren't supposed to be home alone at 2 a.m. and to basically not call the police again. Tina felt like her father didn't believe them. In fact, she would speak about how there were people who thought all of the random things that were happening at the Bowen home, the knocks, the bangs, items moving, could all be Tina, and that maybe she was acting out in her grief of losing her mother. Tina said she thought their home had a ghost, and they were all completely frustrated that no one was believing the girls about what had been going on. Tina herself was starting to get pissed that no one would believe them about the strange happenings, which I don't blame her. I think it's the worst thing when someone doesn't believe you and you are telling the truth, especially as a child. Like, the more you protest and say, I'm being honest, it seems the less people believe you, right? And how scary for them to be home alone all the time, basically, and these things are happening. Someone is knocking on the walls, banging on the windows, all after having a seance trying to contact their mother. I have heard in sources that the girls partially thought that it could be their mother trying to communicate with them. That's confusing. Within a few weeks of the police being called, the girls were basically petrified, and Tina and Kathy started walking everywhere in the house together, just in case. They knew what they had seen and heard, and they weren't going to chance it. At one point, Tina said the girls would sometimes walk in a circle together in different rooms so they could see from every angle if something happened. How sad and scary for them. Your home is supposed to be your safe space. It's hard to think of them being alone and scared so often. So this was ongoing for months and months until Tina said now they were not only scared, but they would basically flip between being scared and angry, like they were sick and tired of being afraid. One evening, they heard a distinct bang on the wall, and they were sort of fed up. Tina said that Kathy immediately grabbed a plastic bat as they all walked to the laundry room, kicked the door in, and said, "Whoever was there, come on out," because they just wanted to get it over and done with now. Tina would also say it was around this time that she had started sleeping with a knife under her pillow just in case, which is very smart but also sad. This went on for about 6 months with the banging and the knocking and the weird happenings. One evening, Tina said she was getting ready to go out, getting her hair and makeup ready as she was going out roller skating. Do you guys remember roller skating? That was like the fun thing to do back then. I mean, this was a little before my time, but it was still kind of the same when I was in school. I remember doing it for like school functions, but my friends and I, that's how we got around back then. We rollerbladed everywhere in our town. It was nothing to go down huge hills, and I felt like it was just another pair of feet. We did it so much. And this was at the end of the 90s. Now, when I try to get on blades, I'm actually acutely aware of just how old and fat I've gotten, and although I don't fall, everything hurts after just like a 14-minute stint. So Tina was getting ready that night. She was excited about going out when she hears a loud bang. A rock had hit the window, and this time it cracked the fucking window pane. But also this time, Frank was home. Tina ran to her father, and this is the first time that Frank gets to take a look at what's going on. Tina said the plan for the night was for Frank to drop them all off at the skating rink, but at that moment when the rock hit the window, Kathy was babysitting somewhere else, so she could earn a little money. After the rock hit, Tina went to go call Kathy and tell her about it, but when she picked up the phone, it was dead. So she ran to another room, and that phone too was dead. The dad would go and look, and they would find not only that the phone lines had been cut, but also burned. And as Frank returned back inside, he was holding a bag of candy and a BB gun. This was finally proof. Tina in her interview seemed so relieved that her father finally saw that they weren't just making shit up and that something very real was happening to these poor girls. He just happened to be home during one of the occurrences. Hell yeah, vindication. Frank would report the cutting and burning of the phone lines, and they would end up being repaired. One day, and now this is December of 1986, Karen gets sick, and Tina would say that someone had to stay home and take care of her, and that fell to her, probably because their dad couldn't afford to take a day off, really. While Tina and Karen were laying on the bed watching TV, Karen had been asleep. All of a sudden, the radio in the kitchen turns on by itself, and the kitchen cabinets start banging around. Tina said she was terrified, but thankfully, Karen was still asleep. So, Tina calls her dad from the phone by her, and she would say that it was lunchtime, and for his job being a restaurant manager, it would be a very bad time to call her father at work, but Tina had to. What else could she do? Tina said that her father was seemingly pissed on the phone and said something like, "We will talk when I get home," and then he hung up the phone. Essentially, Tina and Karen were on their own. So Karen wakes up and she's hungry, so she goes to the kitchen and she starts crying. I guess Karen was looking for the orange juice and the cupcakes that they had just bought at the store, and she couldn't find them. Tina knew that those items should have been there, but she didn't want to frighten Karen, so she just said something like, "Oh, Kathy wanted to bring something for lunch, so she brought the juice and cupcakes." Tina had then told Karen that they needed to get ready to go because Tina needed to get to work, which at the time, she had a job cleaning out horse stalls at a nearby farm. And when Tina was working, Karen would go over to the neighbor's house to be watched. While Tina was getting ready, she heard Karen singing, excitedly, that she had found the cupcakes and the orange juice. She had told Tina that Kathy hadn't taken them and that she had found them. I believe they found them in the laundry room, and when Tina went to look, there were wrappers, where some cupcakes had clearly been eaten. Tina grabbed Karen, and they got the fuck out of there. I think Tina knew something was happening far beyond wall and window knocking at this point. Can you imagine that feeling? Holy shit. So later that night, as they were all getting back to the house, Frank and the girls could see from the driveway that all of the lights inside the home were on, and I mean all. Tina would say that she looked over at her dad and she told him when she and Karen had left that afternoon, it was still daytime and none of the lights were left on. They wouldn't have needed them. When they entered the home, not only were all of the lights in the house on, but so were all of the radios at full blast and the TVs. Everything was on. The dad starts to check out the house knowing there is definitely something going on here. I think maybe before it's easy to push things aside and tell yourself like reasons behind this or that when it comes to stuff like that. Like you could think like maybe the rock breaking the window was some punk on your street, especially back then. Kids probably did more shit like that because there weren't cameras everywhere and we had no technology, so everyone was bored. But I think maybe walking into your home, seeing all of the lights on and shit must have stood his ass at attention, finally. Frank was walking around the house, turning off the radios and TVs as he checked the home, and he had headed downstairs first, making his way with the girls to the upstairs, checking everywhere, including closets and probably under beds. Tina would explain what happened next, which is fucking terrifying to me, and try to picture this as I tell you. So, Frank all of a sudden tells the girls to get their asses in here right now, and of course they did. Tina would say that they kind of peeked into the room and they could see their father face to face with someone standing right there by the closet. Someone who had war paint on his face. Someone whose hair was spiked up and looking wild. Someone who was wearing a fur coat and holding a hatchet. Frank had his hands up in the air as he backed up slowly, telling the girls, it's okay, a homeless person was just looking for some food. And he says they're all going to go into the last room on the left as he's still backing up. As they make their way into the room, Frank shut the door and locked it, trying to keep the girls calm. But at this point, Karen is crying, which of course she is. Can you fucking imagine seeing your dad, obviously scared with his hands in the air, as some hatchet-wielding freak is menacingly walking at your family with wild hair, face paint, and a fur coat? What in the actual fuck? How did this guy just let them walk into a room with nothing more? He didn't swing the hatchet. He didn't say anything. Holy shit. When Frank and the girls got into the room, Frank told Tina to grab the phone, and as Tina made her way to the little table, she realized not only was the lamp missing, but so was the phone. It was gone. Tina starts pacing back and forth in the room, saying the phone and the lamp are gone over and over, seemingly freaking out and maybe even having some sort of a panic attack. When she would yell suddenly, she was going for help as she jumps out of the window and starts taking off running. Tina would say that behind her, as she ran faster and harder than she ever had in her entire life, that she could hear Kathy screaming out of the window, "Run, Tina, run!" Tina would recall she ran through some woods to get to the neighbor's house, and she said that she was being smacked and scratched with tree branches and brush, but she didn't give two shits. She was most definitely in flight, fight, or freeze mode. She started banging on the neighbor's back door, and Tina would say that the neighbor came back there, and when they saw her, they let her in. And she would yell about a man at her house with an axe, and that he had her whole family. She said the neighbor was in complete shock and immediately called the police. She said that all the neighbor and she could do then was wait, which I was thinking, holy shit, that would be the longest few minutes of your damn life, right? She said she was just sitting there wondering, like, are they alive? Did he kill them all? I imagine all the scenarios would be running through your mind, and I'll bet the neighbor was doing the same, wondering if some crazy guy had just possibly followed Tina to their house. And I'd be wondering, is he coming here now? I think things are just a little bit different now in opening the door for someone in an emergency. I was just talking about this with someone the other day. Like, would you answer the door if someone was screaming and banging on your door, or worse, your back door, even if they were in need of help? I've heard the thing to do now is to yell through the door that you're going to call 911 for them, but to keep your door locked, because in this day and age, you have no fucking clue who that person is and if the situation is real or not. I mean, if the person stays there and waits, then it's probably legit, but if they take off running when you tell them you're going to call the police, I would imagine that I would immediately feel relieved that I did not just open the damn door. I will tell you guys a little personal story at the end of this that happened to me and my now husband, having to do with someone being at the door. But since this was longer, I cut it out. After the call to 911 and the wait, there would end up being one state trooper in the driveway. And when Tina recalled this, I was thinking, oh great, they didn't fucking believe him. And they sent one guy. But no, they did believe them, and I guess they also had police hiding in the woods around the house. Karen would then recall a tall police officer coming over to the bedroom window and was telling them to go ahead and come out. Karen said she was crying and screaming, and then all of a sudden her dad grabbed her and threw her out the window to the officer. Hell yeah, sorry not sorry, I would have done the exact same thing. Get that girl to safety one way or another. She can live with broken legs if he couldn't have caught her. I would have been trying to get the fuck out the window the entire time in the first place, though. But how do you do that as the adult? Like, do you go out first to try to catch them, but then you run the risk of the guy coming back into the room with the girls alone, right? Do you throw your girls out first and injure them and then run the risk that they're outside where you can't protect them? That's a rough situation. Tina would say within 30 minutes, her family was then safe at the neighbor's house when her father got down on his knees and told Tina just how sorry he was for not believing her. The police thoroughly searched the home inside and out. A now retired Lieutenant Thomas A. Lane said that they searched the whole house, even inside of any cubbyholes they could find, closets, everywhere, over and over again. They searched the nearby woods and even had cars out searching nearby roads, but they came up with absolutely nothing. No sign of the hatchet-wielding maniac who was hiding in their upstairs closet. They did, however, find the hatchet resting on the ground near the back door of the house, and after searching and also finding the weapon, they assumed that whoever it was had fled the area. The police then told the Bowens not to stay the night there just in case, so I believe they stayed at a hotel. The next day, Frank wanted to be able to get inside of the home to retrieve a few items for himself and the girls, and he called the police asking for an escort because he didn't feel comfortable going in alone, which, who could blame him? When the police met the Bowen family at their home, Tina would say as they pulled up, they saw someone standing in the second-floor bedroom window, waving at them. Can you imagine? Also, why were the girls there? I don't know, maybe they didn't have anyone to watch them. I would not have felt comfortable bringing my kids there. Officer Steve Bezenson would remember that they walked up to the house to check it out and find the person who was waving, obviously. He said as they approached the house, there were no footprints anywhere and no signs of forced entry. This would leave everyone wondering how this person got inside the home, as they had thoroughly checked the house before they locked it up the night before. So I'm just going to call this Officer Steve because his last name is hard for me to say. Officer Steve goes inside the house to look around, and as he starts up the stairs, he sees on the wall a piece of paper with a knife sticking out of it. And as he gets closer, the note read, quote, "I'm still here. Come and find me." What the fuck? Oh my god. As Officer Steve keeps going up the stairs, he sees yet another note with a knife sticking out of it that reads, quote, "I'm going to kill you all." Holy shit. The officer knew that those notes were absolutely not there the night before, meaning that someone was in the house and had placed the notes menacingly. The authorities immediately searched the house, looking everywhere and anywhere that they could, again in a thorough sweep, and they could still not find the person. They were wondering, how is this possible? Officer Steve knew that since they hadn't found someone, that they needed to start looking for other possible spots that they maybe hadn't seen. As Officer Steve was scanning a wall in what I believe was the laundry room, he all of a sudden realized that the wall that he had been staring at, it wasn't a regular wall. In fact, it was a wall that had been built to hide the various house pipes that ran up the wall. Then, as he looked around, there was an 8-inch space at the bottom. And here is when he said, quote, "Someone could fit in there." Officer Steve then grabbed his lieutenant's flashlight and peeked behind when he would see what looked like a 4-foot-tall pile of laundry and said, quote, "I got the son of a bitch right here. That's him." He drew out his gun and he put it right against the guy's temple. I'm assuming here that he's crouching and maybe hiding his face, which is probably why he looked like a pile of laundry. Officer Steve put the gun up against the guy's head and said that he wanted to see the guy's hands, but nice and slowly. The police officer grabbed the guy and brought him outside of the home. This is when Tina realized, to her absolute horror, that she knew this guy. He wasn't a man. He was a teenager. And his name, as Tina said, was Daniel Laplante. So, who is Daniel Laplante? Laplante was born in 1971 to his mother and father, and some sources say his father was abusive, possibly sexually abusive. And some sources would actually say that when his mother had sent him to therapy for his troubles, that the therapist actually took advantage of him as well. If this is true, then it's pretty fucked up that this child was abused at home by his father, the male dominant figure in his life, but then by another male dominant figure in his life, someone that you should be able to be safe with if your home isn't your therapist. Shame on both of them for abusing a child like that in their respective roles. That's fucked up. It doesn't excuse Laplante's later behavior, but I think it's alright to feel bad for someone as a child when they're fucked with. At some point during his childhood, Laplante would be diagnosed as having dyslexia, and therefore he would struggle in school academically. He was also diagnosed with ADHD at some point. I'm unsure when his mother and father split, but I do know that at some point Laplante would have a stepfather in the picture. In fact, in later court documents about the cases, Laplante's mother would say that she didn't believe Laplante had even witnessed any violence from his father when he was younger, and when she remarried to his stepfather, their home life was quote-unquote normal. Laplante, in school, was known to be a big loner, and not like the rest of his family, which had been described as decent, good people. Instead, Laplante was dirty, disheveled, and lacked good hygiene skills. It was reported that although he was smart, his classmates did their best to just not have contact with him. It's those quiet ones that you gotta look out for, I'm telling you. You have your Bundys and your BTKs for sure, but more often than not, the person is disturbed and is described as being off in one way or another. Laplante's quote-unquote antisocial nature would eventually land him in the chair of the school psychiatrist, which tell me what school has a fucking psychiatrist and not just a counselor. This surprised me. It was said that Laplante had a bad habit of breaking into homes when he had some downtime, and he would steal things of value from them. It was also stated that Laplante liked to not only take things from the home, but he also enjoyed moving things around. But careful not to be too obvious, more of a chance to play mind games and fuck with the people who lived there. This must have been the pre-escalation into darkness and madness that they talk about. When Tina realized that she knew this boy Laplante, it would come to the surface that he had actually gotten Tina's phone number from one of the boys who had saw her and Kathy dancing in the windows at the laundromat and had gotten the girls' phone number. When Laplante called Tina, they would end up talking on the phone for months before they would actually go on a date or at least hung out together. Laplante went to the same school as Tina, so he would end up taking her to some school event when Tina was in the 8th grade, but it didn't go as planned. Tina would admit that when she finally laid eyes on Laplante after months of talking, she wasn't attracted to Laplante in person as she had been over the phone. Has this ever happened to you guys before? It has for me, and let me tell you what a huge, major fucking bummer it is when you finally see the person and you realize that they are not attractive at all. I had plans to tell you guys a little story of this also when it happened to me at a younger age, but since this is longer, I cut it out as well. However, if you guys grew up with AOL Messenger, then MySpace, and eventually dating apps, this has probably happened to you at some point, so you get it. Tina would actually say on her interview, quote, "He was just flat out ugly." And I fucking laughed because it turns out he had been telling Tina that he was some athletic blonde guy that was tall, like he was the whole package with smarts and good looks. That's definitely not what Laplante looked like in real life. After Tina had gone out with him the first time, I don't think they ever hung out again, and Tina had essentially forgotten all about him, but said that quote-unquote thing that the cops had brought out was him. She's probably never going to forget him now. This is the boy who they would figure out had been living in their house for the better part of 6 months in the walls. Yeah, the fucking walls. He was the one knocking on the walls to scare them, throwing things out the windows to harass them, stealing their food, moving things around, and watching them all the time. It turns out that Laplante had actually cut out and removed an electrical socket in Tina's room and made it where he could place it back whenever he needed to make it look normal, but he would remove it and watch her in her room. What a fucking creep! Can you imagine finding that out? This fucker had been terrorizing you and your little sisters for months on end, and he was inside your house the whole time? I guess he would come and go out of the walls as he pleased when they weren't home, or even when Frank was gone, I guess, and no one ever saw or caught him. So now, for the episode that I watched where they interviewed Tina and Karen about the whole ordeal, if you guys want to watch it, you can, but I did kind of just give you the rundown. It's called Phrogging, Hidden in My House, and this episode was called Footsteps in the Attic. I didn't know what phrogging was when I started this case, and even though I had lightly heard of this case before on a different podcast, that person doesn't really tell the real details. They kind of change things a lot, but I wanted the real story. Phrogging, and this is spelled with a PH, I guess, is the act of living in someone else's house secretly without them knowing. And that whole show that I used for the episode is all about different cases of phrogging, so I will definitely be watching that. This next part of the story is extremely disturbing and distressing, so fair warning, it gets rough. But I have to tell you guys what happened, and the victims deserve their stories to be told. Daniel Laplante would be arrested and charged with breaking and entering, kidnapping, and something like intending bodily harm because he was holding the hatchet. Laplante was held in a juvenile detention facility as he was 17 years old, where he would remain for 9.5 months until his mother was finally able to afford the bail. She apparently remortgaged her home to get the $10,000 bail, and in October of 1987, she was able to bail him out. When Laplante would get back home, he again decided that while he was waiting for court, that it would seem like a good idea to continue to burglarize homes. From a neighbor's home on the 14th of October, Laplante would end up stealing a .22 caliber gun. On November 16th, he would break into the home of Andrew and Priscilla Gustafson, and would end up stealing things like a cable box, a cordless phone, and possibly some other items. One of the neighbors who lived by Laplante was on edge after he was bailed out, as she would be quoted in the Boston Globe talking about Laplante going into the woods by himself so often. And I guess that's where he had found the Gustafsons' home to rob in the first place, through the woods. But even the neighbor who found Laplante so creepy couldn't have guessed the horrific events to follow. Laplante had been on Tuesday, December 1st, with his family celebrating his niece's birthday, where family and friends said that he was behaving quite normally. In fact, he was seen playing joyfully on the couch with his niece, tickling her as they both laughed. Laplante was playing with other kids in attendance as well, and was known to be a good uncle to his then 6-year-old niece. Later in the day, according to court records and according to the confession from Laplante to a Dr. Soleil, a forensic psychiatrist, Laplante would carry out acts that were deemed not impulsive, rather acts on intention and careful planning. I'm going to say that there was a little confusion as to whether he went to the birthday party first and then committed the acts, or whether he committed the acts and then cleaned up and went to the birthday party after. One way or another, it happened. On December 1st, 1987, Laplante would re-enter the home of Andrew and Priscilla Gustafson and lied in wait. When he would hear Priscilla and her 5-year-old son, William, coming into the house, it was reported in court documents that Laplante's first instinct was to jump out of the window to seemingly flee, but rather, he chose another, darker, sinister path. Laplante would confront both Priscilla and William while wielding a gun, bringing them into a bedroom. Laplante put William in the closet and tied the few months pregnant Priscilla to a bed and raped her. After Laplante was finished, he shot Priscilla in the head twice, killing her. Laplante then walked over to the closet, grabbed William, took him to the bathroom in the house, and sadly drowned the child. As Laplante was leaving the Gustafson home, he ran into Priscilla and Andrew's daughter, 7-year-old Abigail, as she was getting home from school. Laplante sadly grabbed the girl, took her to a different bathroom, and also drowned Abigail, although the reports would say that she was also found with blunt force trauma to her. Laplante, after killing all 3, fled the home. Sadly, not long after, Andrew, the father of the children and husband to Priscilla, the nursery school teacher, would come home to find his entire family slaughtered brutally. I know, it's awful and sickening and hard to even say, but that's what this sick fucker did to this pregnant woman and these 2 babies. When the police arrived at the Gustafson home, Laplante had fled, and they weren't exactly sure at first who would do such an atrocious act of violence. They would, however, figure out that it was indeed Laplante, and a huge manhunt would give way to find him as he was considered armed and dangerous. Apparently, Laplante broke into yet another home of a woman named Pamela McKella, where he held her at gunpoint and forced her to get into her own car. Eventually, as they were driving, Pamela was able to jump out of the car and get away. One source would say that he even tried to rape her as well. Not long after this, the authorities would find Laplante hiding inside of a trash can where they would arrest him. I believe this was 2 days after the murders of the Gustafson family. He was charged for the triple homicide, and this was about the time that the Bowen family realized just how lucky they had been that Laplante hadn't killed their family during the 6-month period he was living inside the walls of their home. Tina mentioned that he had ample opportunities to kill them, but hadn't for whatever reason, and she was sickened by what had happened to the Gustafson family. Karen, on her interview, would cry and say that Laplante ruined her life in many ways, including her childhood memories. Tina would also say that she believed, up until her father Frank died, that he was tormented by what happened to his family. I can only imagine the guilt that he felt when he didn't believe them and how this turned out, but he didn't know all of this, and how could he? I wonder what life was like for the Bowen family after all of this came out. I can only imagine the fear that one would be in constantly after this happened to you as a teenager or even younger. Poor things. No one deserves that terror of what happened to them or the murder victims of this sick bastard. Laplante was found guilty on all of the murder charges. He was subsequently sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences for Priscilla, Abigail, and William. Since the murders, sources say that Laplante didn't seem to have remorse for his actions, and in fact, he would go on to try and sue the courts for violations of his rights. One source would say that Laplante claimed to be a Satanist and that he wasn't able to practice his faith or some shit while he was in prison. Laplante would, a few years ago, try for early release because his sentence was after serving 45 years in prison, 15 for each murder. This was the time allotted before he was allowed to apply for parole. Laplante would be then 62. But in 2017, Laplante tried to get his sentence lessened due to being a juvenile during his crimes. The judge turned this down, saying that he had committed 3 brutal murders, and also stated that Laplante had seemed to display a lack of empathy and antisocial personality disorder as well. In 2019, a law would go into effect saying that juveniles that are convicted of murder may ask for parole after they have served at least 30 years of their sentence. But when it came to Daniel Laplante, a judge upheld the previous judge's findings that he needed to serve at least 45 years. 15 for each murder before he can ask for parole. Let's all cross our fingers that no one ever lets this guy out of jail. He deserves to rot for the rest of his miserable life for what he has done. And that, my friends, is the story of Daniel Laplante, psychopath, frogger, and murderer. This case gives me the willies to think that he was living in the walls of this home, watching the young girls. Holy shit. And who in the fuck murders a pregnant teacher and her 2 young children? Like, what the fuck? Not that this was any better, but he could have left after assaulting Priscilla, or even, sadly, could have left after killing poor Priscilla, but no. He deliberately took William out of the closet to fucking drown him, and the same for Abigail. Sick. Poor Andrew Gustafson, having to come home and to find his family in that state. There are stories and interviews out there of what that was like for him, if you're curious. It's so, so sad. So, my question to you is, when Tina ran to the neighbor's house screaming and crying, and the neighbor let her in, called her 911, I'm curious if you yourself would answer the door if someone was beating on it, asking for help. That's the question of the day. I think personally I would for a child, regardless of danger, which is probably not a great thing because some sicko could use a kid as bait, which we've seen before in wartime, but how could you not answer the door to a screaming child, right? But how about an adult? Would you? My story, as promised, is that a long time ago I lived in Colorado in an apartment with my now husband, then boyfriend. He was sleeping over one night, and he had to leave for work at like 4:30 or some crazy hour, and I would get up with him at times and say goodbye in the morning, and then I would go back to bed until my 2-year-old son would wake me up. One morning, as he was leaving, I was opening the curtains They're like those long, tall plastic things to my back glass door at the apartment, because that's what we used as like the main door. All of us did, because it led out to like this little grassy area and to the street. It was closer than the front door, if that makes any sense. You guys get it. Anyways, it was still dark outside, and as I drew back the plastic curtain thing, I see this lady at my fucking door right there staring at me, saying loudly, "You got me," or "You caught me," or something like that over and over. "You got me, you got me." It scared the ever-loving shit out of me. I'm not kidding. This lady had her hands in the air. Some stranger, she started asking for like help or a ride or something. I can't remember the exact details after the initial shock of seeing someone peeping in my glass, my door. Like, what the fuck? So she ended up saying that something had happened to her at my scary-ass neighbor who lived across the street's house, who we all thought was fucking off, and she asked for a ride. So my husband ended up taking her with him towards the area which he worked, which was like 30 minutes away or whatever, and dropped her off somewhere. I don't remember exactly where, but for years and years, and to this fucking day, it freaks me out to open the curtains to a door or a back door at night. And if I get up in the middle of the night to get like a glass of water or a snack, let's be honest, I zombie eat sometimes at night, I will really fast like open the curtains just to make sure that no one was there. One time, there was a fucking possum there and it scared the shit out of me. It fucked me up so badly, it was scary as shit. And why? Why did the lady say "you caught me" or "you got me" or whatever? I will never forget that. What the fuck is wrong with people? Anyways, what would you have done if you were us or anyone in that situation? Well, I hope you guys enjoyed learning about this fucked up case as much as I did, and remember to yell through the door that you're going to call 911 for someone banging on your doors or windows. You never know who it could be. Come on back next Monday where we will cover another case here on The Kill File where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today. A few quick reminders before you go. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on your platform. It will help the podcast grow and other true crime lovers to find us. Also, check out the website, TheKillFile.com, where you can suggest a case, find our merch shop, and submit a listener file. Follow The Kill File on your favorite social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok. Of course, you can always subscribe on YouTube as well. Find all of the links for the socials on the website. Come back on Mondays wherever you get your podcast fix when we will cover another case on The Kill File where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye.